thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Beyond Methodologies, presented by VFQ. My name is Lanray, and I will be your moderator today. So what's on the agenda? We're going to look at the methodology landscape, as well as trying to simplify that with some of the VFQ guided principles, as well as tying it all up whilst we'll put it into practice. So I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Steve. He's been working with delivery teams for over 30 years. He also brings a wealth of experience with helping transform some of the biggest companies in the world. We'll also be taking questions in the Q&A box at the end of each session, so feel free to ask. Additionally, this session will be recorded and be made available on demand. Now over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Lanray. Okay, so let's kick things off. So I've spent a number of years helping a lot of individuals and organizations improve the way they work using VFQ, which is value flow quality. Later on, we'll go into a little more detail on VFQ, but I thought we'd get started by, well, talking about what the goal of a methodology is. So in essence, the goal of the methodology is really to help take a team and have an idea that they're going to literally take, and they're going to move it from that idea and get it all the way to market as quickly as possible, while attempting to make sure that the product, or for that matter, that could be a change process or even, different ways of working, it's done so by building the right thing. In other words, what the customer wanted, and it's, built they build the thing right. So in other words, it's built in a maintainable way. But first, let's do a quick poll to see how methodologies are working for you guys.
Right, so we're going to launch the poll now, so it should be on your screen. The question is as followed. If you are using the methodology, how comfortable are you with it? Totally, somewhat, not at all. Please answer. Okay, cool. Seems like we've got the results in. Steve, looks like a lot of people are somewhat currently using methodologies. So could you talk us more about that, please?
Awesome, will do. So yeah, somewhat, that's kind of really interesting in the sense that there are a lot of methodologies out there, and we've only kind of put a few on this slide, but there are so many that you could almost say there's an umbrella full of methodologies talking about agility. But actually, folks aren't as comfortable with their methodologies as we would hope. So this in itself is quite surprising. So some of the methodologies have been around. So like Scrum, for instance, has been around since the mid 80s, Kanban since the 50s. And if you really wanted to, you could track it back further than that. So why is it then that we're not as comfortable with these methodologies? Why is it that, they become a challenge? So if we're thinking about delivering to customers, okay, it should be as simple as follow the steps of, whichever methodology you particularly choose. So if we look at, Scrum, for instance, so Scrum obviously is following with the Agile manifesto, backing it up. We see lots of articles written in the press and lots of talks at conferences, and they introduce these methodologies as though they are brand new, but actually they're really not. Okay, but Scrum has these values, these kind of rules, essentially, which essentially gives it a framework, gives us a framework to operate from. So let's take a couple of examples. So customer collaboration over contract negotiation, okay? Working with software over comprehensive documentation. This is a really interesting one for the simple reason that often it turns out that we get working software with limited documentation or no documentation. So in other words, this kind of value gets misrepresented, or, responding to change over following a plan, again, often gets translated into, we actually respond to change, but we don't have a plan. So it's seen as almost being very, very agile, but it doesn't actually help people with the methodology itself. But then there's even more. So not only do we get the values which get mistranslated, but then there are a lot, and I do mean a lot, of principles. If this slide wasn't in front of me, though, I have to be honest, I'm not sure how many of these I would remember like word for word. I would remember a couple of them. Hey, welcoming changing requirements. We deliver software frequently. But then the rest of the words after those first few words are kind of lost. They're kind of missing. So this makes this really cumbersome to remember. So with all these methodologies, what the real problems become is like, as humans, it's like, well, which one do I choose? You know, do I choose Kanban? Do I choose Scrum? Which one is right for me? You know, am I doing it right? And if that's, you know, not bad enough, there are also, but what about other people? They're not using it in the same way I'm using it. When it's inside a much bigger setting, such as a company or organization, then it tends to be that it doesn't stick, it doesn't last. It turns out that we try it, don't get the results that we wanted, and then we typically shy away from it again. So all of this leads us to a problem where it's seen that the methodology, you know, begins to ultimately fail. But actually, is it really the methodology? Well, it turns out actually that it's not. You know, it's not the tools, it's not the processes, it's not you, it's not your friend who's using one different methodology than you are. It turns out that the methodologies were not written in the context of your organization, of the place of work, of your world, or at least not 100% to your context. So in other words, they don't fit perfectly. It also turns out that they can actually take time to learn, to evolve. If you're using multiple teams, then therefore, if it's going to take a lot of time, if it's going to take, you know, a lot more effort, again, humans like this instant gratification kind of craziness. So what we actually see is that trying to adopt agile methods in a vanilla way, in other words, straight out of the box, no changes, it typically fails, despite actually what you will find inside is some local improvements. So an individual, a set of teams begin to see some improvements, but it doesn't make the wholesale change or the wholesale improvement that we were really desperately hoping for. So maybe we should start looking at this from a different angle, perhaps. Maybe we should start wondering, well, what's behind this? This is a quote that I've used a lot over the years in which I've been working with clients and customers and training and education and coaching. But complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex, intelligent behavior. So in other words, if ourselves as humans, if we have a real simple, clear purpose, and we have principles that go along with that, that allows us to build incredible things. We actually act incredibly intelligently. We do smart things. Turns out though, if we have too many rules, too much governance, too much, you know, overbearing kind of control of something, it turns out humans have another habit. We act a little bit like sheep, except maybe as opposed to sheep, we complain a little more. So we really want to focus in on simplicity, okay? So maybe we should simplify agility. Maybe we should simplify this with a set of guiding principles. And I'd like to walk you through the guiding principles of VFQ, so value, flow, quality. And these are designed to help you focus in on what is truly important, get that completed, and get that to your customer, okay? So first, deliver value early and often, okay? So note that I didn't say what early or what often was, okay? So I didn't suddenly say, hey, you have to deliver in 2-week cycles or 4 weeks or with 3 teams, or I didn't give you any kind of like overbearing structure on this. What I just said was deliver value early and often. And early is within your context and often is within your context. So it's deliver it as early as possible for your client. Okay, that is truly at the heart of agility. This type of thinking moves us away from mechanical, like sprints and periods of focus, which unfortunately sometimes, although those periods are really good to help us get something done and complete, often lead to very limited delivery at the end. So unfortunately, some teams, some individuals going through agile methods end up working on products that don't deliver value for a very, very long time. This is something we really want to, to defeat. We want to deliver value. We want to deliver that value early and often to our customers, because ultimately that is really what's important. The second one, optimize the flow of work end to end. So now that we're thinking about value, we should probably turn our attention to making sure that value gets into the hands of the customers. So I've worked with many teams who have made sure that when work arrives, they handle it super efficiently. Like they've optimized every single process within their control. And their customers like, yeah, but I still don't get work, like, in a quick enough manner. When you start looking at the end-to-end process, so the processes that live beyond the development team, it turns out for this unfortunate team, there was a 3-month approval process just to get work started. So without looking at the end-to-end, we're really not doing anything agile indeed. So when we talk about optimizing how work is traveling, we have to look beyond the realms of just what the team control. We need to look bigger. So in other words, from idea to market. So find out what is blocking the work and discover how to solve that problem. Could be as simple as you don't have enough testers. Could be simple like the requirements are not captured correctly. Whatever it is, find the thing that's slowing your work going end to end and fix it. And then finally, discover quality with fast feedback. So we're so used to some things in our everyday life. So take, for example, once upon a time, remember going to restaurants? The waiter would come over after a while and they would ask you, hey, is the food okay? So you have a few choices. You could say yes, well, because it really is good, it's really tasty. Or you could say yes, but really you didn't mean it. You were just being super polite and you were just hoping they would go away and leave you alone. Or you could say no. Actually, the food actually isn't great. The steak is undercooked. The fish is a little raw for my taste. It turns out that actually that's the only option that will get you the outcome that you're really looking for, which is a great quality meal. Well, that is feedback. That's a feedback loop. That's something that the restaurant can do something with. But imagine if you were an engineering team, a development team that were actually building a mobile app. And then you're so happy you're building this great mobile device. It's wonderful. It's got a really great UX. Only then to discover when you get to user acceptance testing that the people who you were targeting this app don't use mobile phones as much as you thought they did. So you targeted somebody like, yep, this is going to be perfect. They'll use this all the time. But only when you get it into their hands do you truly discover what is actually working for them. So that's it. So 3 things: value, flow, and quality. So focusing on those is just one step. There are some other things that you might need to do. One of which is to begin to consider how you think about the world. So obsessing over methodologies is probably not a good thing. Maybe you want to focus on the outcome. Maybe you want to focus on making sure you are, delivering and thinking about what the customer wants. They're at the heart of your world. Embracing change, because again, we can never predict everything. Challenging things, experimenting with things. Instead, often we deliver to dates because they're the dates that we're given. We organize our world around silos, functions, expertise. We become obsessed by the solution and not the outcome. So maybe we should also look at how we think about these problems too. So instead of just implementing methods, maybe we should focus on a couple of questions. Are you delivering value to your customer? Okay, so think about that every day, every week. How am I delivering value to my customer today? And do you have a system of work that allows the work to flow correctly? Okay, so have you optimized how your work is flowing? Have you checked that all the checks and balances and the feedback loops are appropriate? Are you measuring how long things take? Okay, just by focusing on a different couple of questions, it allows us to really get to the heart of what we really need to do. But as a bonus, by the way, focusing in on these questions, questions around value, flow, and quality, it means that if you're already using another methodology, well, guess what? This is like an accelerant for that methodology. It will actually speed up your work. It will improve your processes because you're thinking about the outcomes and not over-indexing on the methodology. So now we have some easy to remember principles. So in other words, we want to deliver value early and often, optimize the flow of work end to end, and we want to discover quality with fast feedback. But what exactly does this begin to look like in practice? Well, the first thing we really need to think about is experimentation, okay? We need to discover what value is. It turns out that what is valuable to me may not be valuable to you. So the only way for me to understand what value is in your eyes is to experiment, to maybe ask questions, to maybe build a proof of concept, to show you something, okay? To actually help you understand. Because if you just say, hey, I want a balloon, great, here's a yellow balloon. That really isn't good if what you had in your mind was a green balloon, okay? So I have to actually try something to find out what is truly valuable. The same goes for flow. In other words, we experiment, we become deliberate about discovering how work is traveling and be deliberate about experimenting and changing things, okay? There's often we say this kind of term, or people say, fail fast. It's not really about failing fast. It's about discovering what works and what doesn't sooner. Fail fast is this kind of awful term because it includes the word fail, which usually incorporates another word called blame. So we want to kind of get away from that and really think about experimentation. And experimentation is such a part of our everyday life. If you are driving to the store, well, there's a good chance that at some times you might take a slightly different route. You experiment. It turns out that driving down a highway, you will take the left lane, you'll take the right lane because the situation is different. Some days you'll get there quicker, some days slower, but it's never the same. You're actually experimenting every single second of every single day. You just don't realize it because we as humans are pretty good at this by now. And then finally, obviously, we're looking at our elements of quality. So again, experimenting. Are we building the right thing? And are we building it right? The only way to do that is to incorporate those feedback loops, is to experiment, is to ask, is to question. But I want to know something else. So let's do another quick poll to see how much you guys experiment.
Right, so we've just launched the poll now on your screens. The question is, do you experiment with your work on a daily basis? Yes, occasionally. No, I'm certain about my role or my work. All right, so yeah, Stephen, so overwhelmingly, people are occasionally looking at experiments on a daily basis when it comes to work. So tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple of thoughts. I love the fact that the yes, I experiment, or no, I'm certain about my work got the same percentage. I kind of that kind of makes me smile. It's occasionally we do it. Sometimes we do it. We think just by testing something with a user, that means we're experimenting. Well, there are 1,000 experiments that you could probably run before that. It turns out that, you know, we don't know as much as we think we know. It turns out that we actually act and react on a lot of biases. We fill in the blanks. We make assumptions. But if we were truly honest with ourselves, we would have a list of things we 100% know, okay? And there'll be a list of things, an awful lot longer list of things, of stuff that we just don't know. Our job is to really take that unknown list and create experiments until we're 100% sure. So take, for example, the mobile app that we talked about earlier. And this comes from a real client, so this is good. Imagine if the first thing they'd done was say, okay, let us do a list of knowns and unknowns. Do we know what device the client uses? Well, somebody would have gone, yeah, mobile device, because I have a mobile device. Great, you have a cell phone and you use it. Why are you assuming that somebody else uses it? Does your target demographic, does your target customer use it? Well, that would have gone into the unknown category because we didn't 100% No. And then lo and behold, how would you go test that out? Well, you go ask somebody. You go, we believe that they use this every day. Okay, let's run an experiment. We can ask the person, and then they say no. Now all of a sudden the development team have a completely different proposition on their hands, because there is no point building something that actually isn't required. So lots of heartache saved, no more getting to UAT where you're showing something that the customer is completely underwhelmed by. So what we have to do is explore and experiment. Where we don't know something, we have to explore. We have to kind of research and ask and talk to people to gain a little bit more knowledge. But then once we have a little bit of knowledge, well, okay, for things that we're still uncertain of, well, we can reduce that uncertainty by running some experiments. And we can repeat this cycle again and again and again. The danger here, though, is it sometimes gets so comfortable running experiments, because, hey, it's like having a 6-month proof of concept. No harm can come, we're having fun, we get to try out all the ideas in the world. However, you're also not delivering value to your customers. So at some point, you have to have a realization that you have enough certainty and enough knowledge to then go and build something, to make it real. And that's the goal. The goal is to just get it over the line enough to show something to somebody, and then guess what? Another experiment. Because what they give you in that form of feedback will give you more input. Okay? So, experimentation, that is like super, super, super important. And often people want to start with, but I know what's valuable. Remember, you don't, okay? Remember, it's not certain. Until you know it's certain, nothing is. So the next piece is really about how do you begin to discover what is valuable? Well, what is valuable to me at this point in time might be a glass of water. But what is valuable to you? Well, depending on where you are in the world, it could be another cup of coffee. It could be coming up to lunchtime, so maybe some kind of lunchtime beverage. If it's super late in the evening somewhere else, well, maybe an evening beverage. But the only way to do this is to actually understand the person you are serving. So understand the customer, okay? And to do that means you need to understand the job to be done. So for me, if my throat is getting a little dry, well, I have a job to be done. It turns out I need to keep talking. So I've got a couple of choices. I could either take a drink and that'd be okay, or I could soldier through it. There's different solutions in there. Maybe we need to build better value propositions or customer journey maps. So the idea is, how do you discover more about your customer? They are key in delivering something of value. So more focus on the customer. So we have experimentation and value discovery. And finally, and again, I say finally because we don't want to overload this. We want things that people can remember, they can consume, because they're easy, they're natural. Look at this picture, okay? Imagine if you were to try to describe this building just using words. You're not allowed to actually show them the picture. Just use your words. Well, it's, I guess it's storage containers with windows that people live in, and there's gaps throughout it so you can see the skyline. Or you could say it's cubist architecture. Almost 99% certain nobody is picturing that image in their mind. They're still somewhere between, I mean, you could even describe this as something from Minecraft. If you did, your kids or your friends' kids or anybody's kids would literally be able to draw that. Something from Minecraft, that's exactly what that looks like. Or as humans, guess what we normally do? Well, we normally just show somebody a picture, and now you can have a conversation. You can go, wow, that's crazy. I'm not sure I'd want to live there. Like living on one of those ones near the front seems incredibly unsafe. That's how we would normally do it. Now, what about things that you guys probably visualize all the time? What happens if you have a huge list of things to do? Well, when we have a huge list of things to do, we typically write them down. It's called a to-do list. And then all of a sudden, everything that you are thinking about or you need to do is captured, it's visible. Well, the trick with that is then now you don't forget it. Now you can do something with it. You can action them. You can cross them off, everything like that. But inside work, well, there's probably a lot more that we need to visualize. We need to visualize, the goal. What are we trying to achieve? Imagine if you actually, in your workspace, you had a giant picture of the goal that you are currently working on right now. Well, that serves a couple of purposes. One, definitely keeps you focused on what you are working on. And it means that you won't forget. Means that you won't suddenly, well, I'm building a mobile app, but let me just build this other thing as well. Let me build a webcam interface. That wasn't the app you were originally building, but you had a great idea. You suddenly got sidetracked. But if you remember the focus of what you were trying to build, what the goal of what you were originally trying to do, you can stay on track. It's easy to do, but also it signposts to other people around you what you're working on. Okay, so there might be people with information, input into what it is. It could be incredibly valuable. The same goes for, when you're looking at how you might solve a problem. Again, we typically visualize things when we're trying to solve something amongst several people. Well, we use a whiteboard. It's like the best solving tool on the planet. We end up sketching out this solution versus that solution, and then we make a decision. In that instant, all you've done is visualize. You've visualized the possible. You've visualized what we might. And then you move on from that, and then you work out, what are we going to do? So the direction of travel, the solution that you are actually going to build. At that point, maybe you're tracking the daily tasks. Maybe you're using something like a Kanban, or, again, a Kanban board, or those kind of things. An information radiator, as some Agile methodologies would call it. But what you're doing is you're making your work visible. The one thing I would say here, though, is be careful, because sometimes when we make things visible, we may have made it invisible too. So real customer, real board, real fun, except when the cleaner comes around and starts hoovering and the Post-it notes disappear. But the idea, again, is solid. We're making sure that we are tracking everything, okay? And how you track things, what you track, okay, is within the context of the work that you're doing, okay? So nobody is saying you have to have this type of visualization. You must use this tool. It's more about keeping the basics in mind. So we should experiment. We should discover what is valuable. We should visualize our work, okay? Those things will enable us to deliver value early and often, optimize flow of work end to end, okay? And discover quality through fast feedback. It really can be that simple. Or I can go look up the new safe picture and try and work out what's changed from the last release, or I can go to yet another conference to hear somebody else tell me how to do Scrum a totally different way, or how to get Scrum working if I'm working for this type of client. We believe that sometimes that things can be made more difficult than they need to be. So with that in mind, the more complicated we make something, actually the stupider we become. We just follow the rules. We just follow the instructions, whether they're working or not. But actually, if we give ourselves a little bit of clarity, if we give ourselves simple, clear purpose and principles, it gives rise really to some incredible behavior. We build these incredible things. Okay, so really the ask here is simplify. Make life easy for yourself. Why would you make it more complicated than it needs to be? If only life was as simple as we stop right there. But the idea is to try these things out. Try out the 3 practices and principles, okay? But beneath that, there is the mindset and tools. So this today was really just scratching at the surface. It's like the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more beneath. If you go check out valueflowquality.com, you'll find an awful lot more of this content, which again is designed to kind of simplify realistically what you do.
Thanks for that, Stephen. That was a really comprehensive review of like obviously beyond methodology and obviously underpinning it with some of the value flow quality principles. And so yeah, I mean that's it for the webinar for now. We've got a Q&A box, so feel free to put in some questions now, and then we'll answer it as and when it comes through. Thank you. And also don't forget to follow us across all our social media platforms. So we're on LinkedIn, Twitter. There's just value flow quality as well. So you know.
Thanks, Lanry. You beat me to that reminder about the Twitter and LinkedIn.
All right. Okay. Cool. I think it seems like we've got a question. So I'm already using Scrum. Can VFQ help me?
So yeah, so I hinted at earlier that no matter what methodology you choose, okay, focusing in on what is the most valuable thing. So if you just take the three constructs of value, flow, and quality, okay? So think about what you're working on inside your sprint. So focus on, is this the most valuable thing to my customer, okay? Taking that as, there's a lot of things we will build. How might we deliver value earlier? Okay, so breaking the work up into a different series of items to allow the work to travel easier, better, smoother. Looking at how the team is working, so understanding the flow of work within the sprint. You know, do we have enough people? Do we have the right skill sets, etc.? And then finally, obviously, making sure the feedback loops are there. So even though we're using Scrum and traditional sprints, just still incorporating that thought process of value, flow, quality will allow you to actually enhance the methodology itself.
Okay, cool. Another question's come in as well. What else could I do to get started?
What else can you do to get started? I'm going to quite easily say, well, you should follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. But actually, go check out the website. Go check out some of our case studies, some of the material that we publish. But one of the things that I would say to get yourself started is check that the goal that you and your team are working on is the same goal as you think. So in other words, gather everybody, maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, and just check that you all have a really good view of what the goal is. And if you don't, maybe question that, maybe go deeper, maybe use something like the 5 whys technique, and go a little deeper to find out, well, why are we building this? Why do we want this? To truly get to the heart. So it's really simple and easy and straightforward. But I would definitely, A, go to the website, of course, B, follow us, C, if all that fails, then get hold of me because I'm on screen right now. But yeah, starting with the goal is usually a great uncovering of, are you really working on the right things? Because you wouldn't believe how many teams make assumptions as to why they are doing the things they're doing. And if you can start everyone off on the same footing, everything else becomes easier from there. It becomes more simple, straightforward, and therefore you can deliver value early and often, etc.
Yeah, that's it for the questions today. Just a reminder, if you've got any more questions, again, feel free to reach out to Steve, as you can see his email address, as well as also use info@valueflowquality.com as well, just to reach out, and yeah, we'll be in touch soon. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.